Hello and welcome back to the Awakening Philosophy Podcast. My name is Jed, and today we are in the Meno. We have discovered a fantastic question, which is our job. Part of reading is looking for questions, solving puzzles. We wear a adventurer's wizard cap when we do philosophy, but we also wear a Sherlock Holmes cap. All of this is part of philosophy. All of this is part of reading. And all of this we can use as material to wonder about the text itself. The text is asking, what is virtue and can it be taught? What we are doing is reading and learning how to do that in a different kind of way. So is what we are doing in the way that we are reviewing, pulling out questions, structuring the parts of the text according to the dialectic, is any of that virtue? Are we becoming more excellent in doing in this way, in reading in this way, this new kind of reading, this new kind of learning? And can we contrast it with our friend Meno? Is he doing it? Is he falling down? Where is he falling down? Is Socrates doing it? Is Socrates using the same methodology, using the dialectic structure, pulling out questions, wondering about it? So this is how we're reading. We're learning how to read as we go, and we are demonstrating it and seeing if we can benefit from it. And the whole time we are contrasting all of this with Meno and looking for divisions or other examples out in the world. In your relationships, how well can you do this? What happens if you do? What happens if you don't? Do you know other people who are more like Meno and less like us when we read? Do you catch yourself being a Meno at times? And are there times when you are open and curious and looking for puzzles and pulling out questions and doing your best to to think with the dialectic, to structure things with the dialectic? And if you do fall into a Meno way of being, can you jump out? How do you jump out? Is having a question and reading in this kind of way part of the escape? Or maybe not escape, the ascension, part of pulling yourself out of a hole? All of these are questions, and from reading in this way, we have discovered a question that most people don't get. So we're already ahead of the game, which of course is not a competition, it's not a zero-sum game. Hopefully everybody is in the Meno. That would be a much better world. But for at least for us, we are able to read the text because of the Balboa translation. And as we've been seeing, the other translations are garbage. Now, some people make the claim that, well, sometimes it reads better. And sure, every now and again, sometimes the wording of this can be confusing, the Balboa translation. So we'll pop into the other text just to see how it reads. So that's a benefit of having the previous texts. But from our experience, we've only had to do it a couple of times. So not worth the damage the past translations have done to philosophy, perhaps. In other words, the past translations we have seen have been translating it very much the way Meno thinks. All of the important words of philosophy have been mistranslated. And not only mistranslated in a specific way that we can understand. So Meno is unfamiliar with the realm of being. Certain ideas that are kind of beyond him or he's unfamiliar with because he is unfamiliar with the world of being. So to our translators, all of the words that refer to being, self, eidos, nous, ousia, all of these key words, fundamental for understanding philosophy. In fact, the goal of philosophy, or one of the goals, there are goals even beyond those, not in there. Mistranslated, taken out, translated as physical things, physical world things. So a big problem. But also, it's interesting to see that problem because we're also reading Philosophical Midwifery, where we learn where we get our problems. Why did we stop our development as babies into, through our own self-understanding, based on our own self-experience, to have greater experiences, self-experiences, ultimately to have an experience of self and have an understanding of it, nous and dianoia. In other words, where did we stop this quest that we were all on as babies? That's the introduction of the pathologos. The pathologos functions, as we've been reading, to stop this thing that we're doing, following the logos, and stop the self. We sacrifice ourself. We sacrifice our self-goals, our self-understanding, our self-experiences. All of these things are sacrificed to pick up a certain false belief about self and reality that keeps us a member of a certain tribe, family, clan, a family, clan, and tribe and tradition. That is the cause of our problems, cause of our suffering, and prevents us from reaching our goals. Why? Because that open, free, curious state of mind that we are wondering about while we read the Meno is not allowed. It's a threat to the way of being of the family. But also the logos is not allowed, because the logos, understanding, reason, challenges the false beliefs. And that's what we saw in the text here. We saw that people are not bad people because they seek bad things. They act in bad ways because they have been led to believe bad things are good. It's a problem of belief. There are not evil human beings running around. They're not babies running around that are evil. We learn false beliefs from childhood, specifically pathologos, that are preyed upon by other con artists that get us to believe many bad things are actually good for us. And we talk about there are certain political parties and political movements that are based simply on that principle, using fear of other and appeals to family clan loyalty and family and inherent family prejudices or pathologos to get people to act against their own interests and vote for fascism or support tyrants. That's the right, we call it, as though it should be half of the political discourse, which is insane. So we need to go back to that state of mind. So this was what we were reading in the Philosophical Midwifery book. We have to go back to that state of mind and go back to our self-understanding through our self-experience, or the self-logos. States of mind and logos we have to go back to, otherwise we'll be unable to reach our goals. So our question is, of this text, is Meno able to do that? Is Meno able to be in a better self state of mind because he came in all certain, like he knew everything, like most people in our world? And we are wondering how well he is doing following the self-logos. Because Socrates, a master of the self-logos, is really laying it down over and over again, dropping some masterful dialectics on our asses. And he's even given us enough to develop the paradigm, understand the paradigm of the logos. That he has said, well, Meno, you now have the paradigm, use it. Use the paradigm of this thing we call dialectic, which is the use of the logos. To do it, to give a definition of what excellence is, of what virtue is. How well is he doing it? How well is he following the logos? And how well is he changing his mind? So all of these things are questions we have and judgments we're making as we go. And we're also comparing it to our understanding of the pathologos, which specifically blocks our open, free, curious states of mind and specifically blocks the logos. And we're seeing the significance of how this plays out here, which is neat. Because it doesn't matter if Meno does it or not. Doesn't matter if all these fascists and capitalists and people exploiting others through their ignorance come along to the logos or not, because we can do it. We can benefit. That's why we read. So, also, be nice to share it with the world. Would be a nicer place to live with less people who are fascist. Another way of saying that is they are themselves a slave to their fascist beliefs. Where do those beliefs come from? That's the pathologos. So they are people who most unjustly act out tyranny are themselves slaves to their own inner tyrant or pathologos. So the more that we can read the Meno and wonder about what virtue is, what the opposite of that is, and a demonstration through our friend Socrates, and at the same time study the philosophical midwifery book that we read, which helps us to understand the cause of our problem, then the better we will be, the better our souls will be, and the better the world will be. So, all that in mind, we have been doing it. We have been reading in this way, and as a result, we have gained a new question. A new quest. Last time we finished, let's jump into the text, have a look. Socrates pointed out that he asked for the whole of virtue, a definition. By the way, how do we come to definitions? That's something that we learnt happens through the dialectic. So another way of asking that is, how do we understand something? You need the dialectic. So let's learn that. Again, what's the opposite of dialectic? Well, there's lots of things, including debate. I'm getting kind of tired of YouTube suggesting, YouTube algorithm saying, oh, you like philosophy? Oh yeah, sure I do, Mr. Algorithm. Well, then you'll like all these philosophical debates. Oh, no. I hate them. Even if there's an otherwise smart person, debate doesn't do anything. Doesn't address the cause of problems. It doesn't discover the cause of problems, doesn't understand how to address them, and doesn't understand how to do the opposite. Find the excellence, find virtue. So, one thing we know from our experience of YouTube philosophy algorithms is you can't teach virtue through debates. In fact, that just doesn't do anything. At best, it's a tangent distraction, allowing terrible things to continue. How many philosophy debates do I need to see before we address the causes of capitalism and genocide? 5 more? Somebody better book that Richard Dawkins or that Alex Connor on 5 more debate shows, so we have enough of what we need, enough ignorant people being owned, and fascist grifters, right-wing grifters being destroyed in a debate, until we can actually address the cause of the grifting, which we call capitalism, and the right wing, which is fascism and tyranny. So these 2 big ones, fascism and capitalism, you can say is inherent within the word right-wing grifter. Right-wing is a pseudonym for tyrant or fascist, people driven by their pathologos tyrant. And grifter is another way of saying succeeding in capitalism by using false beliefs to trick people to act against their own interests so I can extract wealth from them. That's called profit, and that's the game. So inherent within the word right-wing grifter are the 2 fundamental biggest problems that we have to address as a society. And how many of them need to be owned by a debate bro or whatever philosopher they call themselves, until we actually address the cause of what causes them to act in that way. By the way, all of those debates just point more eyes on them. They get more attention, which is what they want. That's the right-wing grifting arc. People act in a bizarre way to get attention, like Liver King or Andrew Tate or whoever the hell. Those right-wing grifters who go to college campuses and argue with children, with young people who are only starting to learn how to think, and cause controversy, get a lot of hate clicks, and then they capitalize that by saying, oh, now I've got a lot of people paying attention to me, I will be a professional opinion haver. And by the way, the opinions that cause the most interest and traffic are fascist ones. And the ones that can most convince people to act against their own interest are fascist ones, tyrannical ones. So if I want to make money, I have to play the right-wing game, which is appeal to pathologos opinions people have that makes them more susceptible to buying my course or whatever the hell. So very standard stuff that we can understand by understanding how the logos and pathologos works. But again, all of that is the opposite of the dialectic. We want to learn what's different. How do we not just own grifters or destroy con artists built on beliefs, whether they be right-wing beliefs, fascist beliefs, capitalist beliefs, or religious beliefs? It's all the same game. Once you've seen one of those debates, you've seen them all. So, what do we need to do instead? This game. Dialectic. Debates don't change anyone's mind, it seems. So, how do we do that? Well, one of the ways of doing that is learning to read the way that we are reading here. Ooh. And by having read in such a way, we have discovered a question. How can, if we want the whole of virtue, not its parts, what's virtue? Doing anything you want with a part of virtue. That's not a definition. The question we got was, how can you ever know what virtue is when you do not know the self? We looked at that last time. Very important. We have this wonderful diagram on the board. So everything that we've been talking about so far has been everything below this line here. So capitalism, fascism, tyranny, right-wing conservatism, blah, blah, blah. All of those things are all beliefs. What does debate say? My belief versus your belief. Why does nothing ever happen? Because you can't solve problems of beliefs with more beliefs. You either believe them already or you don't. There's a reason why religious children are born into the same religion as their family. They get it from a young age from their family. So you can't reason your way out of it. You have to go to a higher cognitive level, the level of understanding. That's what we're doing here. We're making that jump. This is the dialectic, the movement from belief to understanding, or you begin by what is called philomathesis. This is what we saw in the Phaedo. Philomathesis is a kind of belief applied to these texts, the Balboa translations of Socrates. Why? Because it's a kind of belief, a trust in the logos. Now, it's not belief because of authority, because of fear, because of evolutionarily developed fear of everything outside the cave as being bad and scary. It's a belief based on reason and evidence and displays of wisdom and mastership. In other words, if you were raised in a terribly like a fundamental religious upbringing or whatever, you might say, I want to be a master mechanic, I'm going to study from my priest. That's nonsense. But a lot of people think that. They get medical advice from their priest, they get financial advice from their priest, they get spiritual advice from their priest. The priest isn't qualified for any of those things. That's the insidious nature of belief. You don't have to have understanding or knowledge or experience or nous. It's just, I wear the funny hat. Famously, this is a problem. In Australia, turn on the TV at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. You have all these crazy American idiots claiming to be experts in finance, experts in love, experts in relationships, and all of the advice is just their own personal beliefs. Dr. Phil, same thing. He's known as a grifter. He's completed his right-wing grifting arc. Now he started off with, look, I got some beliefs that I'm passing off. Let me get in a position of authority over all of these guests who are only on the show because they're poor and I give them money, and let me use that authority to push my beliefs on them. Something that Meno was talking about. Expressing your own personal beliefs as if they're true and using whatever power you have to do that. And anybody who's against your beliefs, you could consider them bad and worth harming. Anyone who supports you, they're good and worth benefiting. A very, very, very common idea of what virtue is based on complete ignorance and injustice. Operating at the level of beliefs only. If there's no truth, everything is just beliefs. And we get our beliefs from childhood, then isn't life just a way of forcing your prejudices on the world? That's debate. So that's the problem. So of course, a belief isn't our only way of functioning. We can develop understanding. We can have experience, knowledge based on experience, specifically experience of eternity or being. That's nous. And we can even gain an understanding. Philosophy, dianoia, understanding of that. That's what Socrates is employing. So Socrates is up here. He's saying, hey, I am using my understanding that we can discover for ourselves through the dialectic that justice, temperance, courage, holiness, these are all virtues that exist as eidos aspects of being. So what is he doing? He's using dianoia. He's using an understanding not of the physical world, which is where debates and war and genocide and all that crap happens. All the ignorance that we suffer happens from people who aren't operating at the level of principles, universal principles that exist eternally in being. That's why beliefs versus beliefs don't work. Well, what's true? I don't know. I can quote Hegel. Does that make me right? Well, I can quote my Bible. Does that make me right? Well, I can quote the founding fathers. Meno quoted the poet that he happens to agree with. That's the problem. So we want to get out of that problem and have what Socrates had, understanding of this, but he points out so we can recognize that this understanding is allowing Socrates to help Meno at the level of beliefs. So when we go to these debate bros or people who claim to be philosophers or claim to be alpha whatever, alpha red pill whatever, or claim to be life coaches or claim to be spiritual people, we can say, hey, let's use our understanding to help them realize they are operating at the level of beliefs. That's a problem. That limits them. And do our best to invite them into a dialogue that Socrates is having. Treat them like a friend if they want to play. If they play, then all they have to do is what we saw today, aporia, which is still virtue, not knowing, being all puzzled and not knowing the answer, not having gold and silver for Meno down in the physical world, but for us, not having, what are we interested in? We're not interested in physical world things like gold and silver we can't take with us in our soul. We want nous, knowledge of eternity, knowledge of being, and understanding of that. So it's not just a blind, blissful experience. We want to recognize where we are at. That understanding can help you go into it further and further and further. That understanding can also help us give birth to a question that we have given birth to in the quest. If these things are aspects of virtue, we want the whole of virtue. So that's a question that you can only have if you've been initiated, as Socrates says, which is the goal of education, initiated into this experience. Education called philomathesis, love of learning, a certain kind of belief. You trust that there's a reason why so we're going back to the analogy, there's a reason why you are an apprentice mechanic from a mechanic who has demonstrated an understanding of cars, demonstrated the ability to apply that understanding and experience, demonstrated knowledge of both together. So that's different from just blind belief or faith. That kind of trust, reasoned trust, justified trust you have in the logos, that's learning, philomathesis. Now, once you start doing that, you are gaining the material you need for philosophy, which is the dialectic. The structure of the dialectic, you need some things to put in there. That's what we get from the text. So the keywords we're getting, like aporia, like virtue, like eidos, like beliefs, these are all things from the text. We wouldn't be able to make this diagram, the word self, we wouldn't be able to make this diagram unless we had the material from the text. Just like if you're a mechanic, you wouldn't be able to start piecing out the structure of how the car works unless you know what a gasket is and what an engine is, what a tire is, what a steering wheel is. You have to get these first. That's philomathesis. That's why we read the text at the pace we read and reflect as often as we reflect, to gain these terms. Then we have to gain understanding. We have to make these diagrams and see how these diagrams themselves could represent the dialectic. Can we see DDDC, or definition, demonstration, division, conclusion? Can we see that within even the structure? Because that is formally philosophy. And if we're able to do that, then we can have this kind of question that Socrates has put on the table for us. If all of these things are beings, eidos, knowable in nous, understandable in dianoia and dialectic, aspects of being, but we want the whole of virtue. So not only are they aspects of being, they are also parts of virtue. What does that mean? That means if we want the whole of virtue, we also want the whole of being. How do we gain a grasp, an understanding, an experience, and a mastership? The ability to fix the car, the ability to talk to debate bros, the ability to help Meno, to help our friends, help humanity. How do we get that if it requires a grasping of the whole? Well, we can, because of this principle of as above, so below, or metaphor or likeness, the unfolding of the logos to different levels of reality, we can look at where we are. So we can use what Socrates is doing to Meno to gain some hypotheses about this question. What's Socrates doing to Meno? He is not saying, well, those are your beliefs from your teacher. Well, my teacher's a better teacher. Have you heard of my teacher? Well, therefore I win. Oh, you're quoting Kant, but I can quote Hegel and Nietzsche, so my beliefs win. You quote the Bible, but I can quote the Quran and the Torah and the Vedic scriptures, so I win. That's debate bro bullcrap. That's everything else on philosophy on the internet. Except for Dr. Grimes and stuff, of course. So what is he doing instead? Socrates is using an understanding of beliefs and how they function, such that we can recognize this, because we are developing an understanding of the nature of beliefs formally in philosophical midwifery, because you have to understand the nature of the beliefs to understand what are false beliefs, pathologos, that cause our problems, what are its conditions, what are its causes, and what's needed to free ourselves from it. So necessarily, philosophical midwifery requires us to be operating at that level. But that also allows us to recognize a fellow mechanic. Because just as a mechanic, a master mechanic, you can have a car roll in and he'll immediately recognize a bunch of stuff. I know the make of that car. I know the model. I know the problems it's likely to have. I can tell by the sound of it the problems it might have. So too, as soon as Meno rolls into the shop, Socrates goes, I know what you're like. I know the family you're probably from. I know the city you're from. I know what your partner is probably going to be like. I know what your teacher is like. And I also know what you think it means to be knowing. Go around confidently answering any questions of anyone, no matter what. The kind of things that debate bros, Tim Pools and Ben Shapiro's and all these sorts of terrible people, right-wing pundits do. They've claimed that their opinions are good on everything and they can answer any question, but it's all just a giant grift. Certainty, alpha, right? All these alpha bros. I'll tell you what it means to be a man. Pretend you know everything and punch anyone who disagrees with you. And hate women, because I don't know why they do that. No, I do know why they do that, but it's irrelevant. Important to recognize, though, they are establishing a kind of hierarchy inherent. Just the fact that they're a man makes their opinions better than women or people of different color skin or people with less money and all that kind of crap. Instead of what's an actual hierarchy? Hierarchy of cognitive functions, epistemology, and ontology. What is? Hierarchy of levels of reality, the physical world, the world of being, the world beyond being. And that's what is. And how do we climb that ladder? The actual hierarchy, shifting through cognitive functions, going from beliefs, recognizing pathologos beliefs, prejudice beliefs, simple beliefs, scientific beliefs, trust in the logos and axioms, using that highest class of belief to go into a different cognitive function understanding, and even that's a springboard to nous, and even that's a springboard to where our question is now. Because we can look at this question: how do we grasp the whole of beliefs such that we can recognize a Mustang, 57 Mustang when it rolls into the shop? How do we grasp the whole of, that's the whole of mechanics. How do we grasp the whole of belief so that we can recognize a Meno when he rolls into the shop, and also know how to treat him in a masterful and beneficial way? How do we benefit him? You have to be operating from a higher ontological and epistemological level. You have to be operating from dianoia, understanding of being. So, if that's the case, and that's what we're seeing Socrates do, and he's made that point several times, he's pointed that out specifically. It's a comedic tragedy that your education didn't help you reach this. It's funny that, and also tragic, that the dialectics on being you didn't understand. Only when I talked about physical things in the physical world, you like those dialectics. And he is telling on himself as well. He says, oh, you know what's virtue? Having gold and silver, having honors and offices. These are all, gold and silver is love of wealth, philoklimatos. Honors and offices is love of honor, philotimos. These are the two things that causes the sicknesses in the soul, because these are the two aspects of love of physical things. Philosomatos, love of soggy tomatoes in the physical world. Soggy tomatoes, philosomatos. Philomathesis is loving learning. That gets you up. So not only has Socrates pointed it out in how Meno functions, how he's learned, his upbringing, his teacher, but Meno's also telling on himself. All of this is just like us. All of this we can recognize because we're reading in this way. By reading this way, we are bringing ourselves up to here. We are learning. So we're learning to recognize a 57 Mustang just as, well, our equivalent is we're learning to recognize a Meno as soon as he walks in. Not so we can own him in a debate or destroy him, I don't know, on a react video, but so we can ultimately benefit him. Fix the car, fix the broken car, make it better, improve it. Okay, so using that principle, the question is, if our question is, how do we function in that artful, let's write it down. How do we function in that artful, let's use a different color, beneficial way that with mastership, with understanding, and experience or knowledge, nous, let's say knowledge, understanding, the Greek word is dianoia, it's a better one, nous, all of which we can wonder, hang on a second, is all of this virtue? Is all of this excellence? And it also requires grasping the whole. Grasping the whole. If you can't grasp the whole of a 57 Mustang, how will you know whether or not a part is in the right or wrong place? Grasping the whole. So how do we grasp the whole of being, where principles are? So any philosophers or debate bros or whatever who are still debating people, stop it. Instead, start wondering about the actual principles. It's not true because you can quote Hegel. It's true because it's an aspect of being which is the eternal cause of our physical world. It's the nature of mind itself. It's what we are returning to on our journey to go beyond. And it's where principles lie. Principles. Capitalism isn't bad because I'm not winning and I'm not as Jeff Bezos. It's bad because it breaks the principles of justice, of fairness, of care, of benefit, of mastership, of artfulness. It's objectively bad. It's not a matter of opinion. It's not a vote. So if we have to grasp the whole of being to be able to act artfully, beneficially, masterfully, with dianoia, with nous, how do we do it? And is all of this virtue? We're wondering. Well, using this principle, we realize, well, what's the cognitive and existing level? So level of existence that we can be on, and cognitive level, how do we think? What's our method of thinking? Are we pointing to shapes and colors? Are we leaning on prejudices? Are we leaning on religious beliefs that we happen to get from our dumb parents? Everyone else's parents are dumb, not yours. Don't take it personally. Yours are actually the wiser ones. What are we using? That's cognitive functions. That's how the faculties of consciousness, faculties of mind that we can use. So how do we apprehend, and what level of existence would be beyond that allows us to grasp the whole of the level below? That's what we call the self. That's the self level. One self, good self, maybe true self. And is that needed for excellence and virtue? Is that needed to help not only people with false beliefs like Meno, who are not yet philosophers, and dictators and fascists and capitalists and politicians and debate bros and philosophers and bankers, all of these people who are down here, not only, hey, thumbs up, welcome to the stream, last outlaw. Not only can we help people here, but because we are operating here, we can grasp even the level of being. We can help people who are philosophers. We can help people who are actually on the quest to better understand their experience of nous. Maybe they haven't had one yet, like Meno, they haven't been initiated. So how can we help them to develop their dialectic and understanding so that they can become open and receptive with logos, which is the doorway to the experience of nous? Or those who've had the experience but without understanding, how can we help them to develop an understanding and free them from their false beliefs that would limit them, like Socrates is doing with Meno? Help them go into it in greater depth, so to improve their nous and dianoia. That's right, dianoia there. Dianoia is understanding of the realm of being. So it's dianoia. So a better word for philosophy could be philodianoia. N-O dianoia. And help them to reach this question where we are on in the text: how do you even go beyond the level of philosopher? Remember, in our reading of the Phaedo, there was philomathesis, the best kind of this, but that led into philosophy. But philosophy isn't the goal. Philosophy is itself a stepping stone to what Socrates calls philophronesis, which would require you not to be content with just experiencing being and understanding it and developing an artful, beneficial mastership of it by grasping the whole of beliefs below, so you can help people with their false beliefs, like Socrates is doing with Meno. But help people at this level. Some of us are at this level. Many people watching this will probably be at this level. They're tired of gold and silver and fame and offices, Instagram famous and getting a lot of clicks and likes. They're not interested in that. They're tired of debates and people butting heads about whose beliefs are right. Let's kill each other. Whether it's on a stage by being destroyed in a debate, or being destroyed with bombs because you're a different color or you have a different religion. You're tired of that. That's probably why you're here, because you've had either you love understanding, you want to understand what's always going to be true, principles, you recognize the value of logos, reason, understanding, or you've had an experience of being and it's the most profound thing you've ever experienced and you want to understand it. Your experience of mind itself or reality itself blows anything in the physical world out of the water. So in other words, how do you help people on this level? That's the question. You have to go to a higher level. That's the principle. You can't solve problems at the cognitive level, at the level of cognitive functioning at which it was created. That's that famous Einstein quote. You can't solve problems with the level of thinking that was used to create the problem. So, if Socrates is functioning here to help Meno is functioning here, Socrates is doing that thing that he often does, Oh man, how do you pronounce it? Iolaus. Iolaus was the assistant to Hercules. Hercules was the main hero. Socrates says, I am here to help you get there. If virtue is up here, do you think Socrates can teach it to us? Or he can give us what we need to realize if this is something you can't be taught, you have to do, you have to be the hero. And if this is likely the archetype of the hero's journey, all other heroes' journey, Luke Skywalker, Harry Potter, Katniss from Hunger Games, all of those people are representing this hero's journey in the physical world with vampires or magic, lightsabers and stuff. That's all metaphorically. We like it because something in our soul resonates with it, but what we are doing is the actual thing. We are doing the actual hero's journey. You are actually doing what you're here to do, says Socrates says the logos that Socrates helps us to see if we read. If that's the case, Socrates says, hey, by the way, I'm not Hercules, you're Hercules. I'm Iolaus, his trusty assistant. In other words, if Socrates is here, he wants you to go up there. And if we see why it has to be that way, maybe we can come up with an answer to the question of the text. Can virtue, which seems to be up here, be taught? And if Meno can't even be taught how to drop his false beliefs to get into the realm of understanding of dianoia, then what chance do we have by Socrates just telling us how to be there? That's why we have to read. You can't just tell Meno, hey, you're wrong. He's been told many times his beliefs are wrong. Socrates equally can't tell us, hey, you guys here, you got to get up there. But there is a question. Well, why is he talking at all? How can you have this principle of excellence at all? Because excellence should involve a beneficial mastership and artfulness and understanding, a grasping of the whole, and knowledge. How then can you actually employ it to help somebody? Go from here to here. That's why we're reading in this way. So the theme of today has been so far, we are learning to read. Unless we have our wizard's cap on, recognizing we are on the true hero's quest, the true mystical quest, unless we have our Sherlock Holmes hat on, when we read, we look for puzzles that we can solve for ourselves, then how else can Socrates give us the clues so that we can do it ourselves? How else can we be a Hercules to Socrates' Iolaus? So that's why we're reading in this way, and why it's necessary to read in this way. And by the way, what's the old idea of reading and the old idea of education that's done nothing but cause a world full of inequality and injustices? Creating nothing but nuclear bombs and mousetraps, to use that famous saying. The physical model. We are a piggy bank. Whoops. The model of education we have been using is we are an empty piggy bank, a physical thing, and education is just dumping beliefs into your head, and then you regurgitate it on a test to make sure that they're in there, and then you get a tick, and then you go out and be a slave in the fascist capitalist machine. That's garbage. It's garbage. It's a garbage model. It's a lack of a model, really. It's a model that only has people's perceptions here. By the way, who does that serve? The rich getting richer, the people who want gold and silver. And also, it makes people unable to understand the cause of their fascist or oppressive or capitalist political systems. So it allows people who want fame and offices, it allows these people, these tyrants, to be tyrannical. It allows these bankers to be tyrannical through wealth. In other words, this system only benefits the Philo soggy tomatoes, love of soggy tomatoes. Philosomatos, lovers of riches and honor, to maintain their inequality and injustice. So what do we have to do? Replace this old, unjust, bullcrap model of what a human being is, a piggy bank, with this true understanding of true education, apply it to ourselves at all times, which means unlearning our crap education, which is what we do in philosophical midwifery, but also practicing at all times what we are learning about virtue. If we are learning that virtue is using the dialectic, then use it all the time. If courage is following the logos even when your beliefs feel right, then do it all the time. If it means treating someone like a friend, like Socrates says to Meno, hey, if you weren't a friend, I would say any time you negate what I say, I'll say it's up to you to prove it. You have to use the logos to prove that what I said was wrong. But if you're a friend, I can be more gentle and use the dialectic and ask you questions so that you can come to an understanding. To help you. So in other words, if that's what Socrates demonstrates, being a friend, then be a friend at all times. Be a friend to those who are open to being friends with you, open to actually following the logos, open to being wrong sometimes, aporia, so they can be curious to learn something new. If they're stone-headed and they can't ever be wrong, then screw them. Say, hey, it's up to you to show why your arguments against what I'm saying is wrong, says Socrates. But if you're open to being curious, to aporia, then you're a friend. If you're open to the dialectic, then you're a friend. If you see the value in the logos and the dialectic and midwifery, you're a friend. Then treat like a friend. And if you are in this game, if you're watching this channel, then you are interested in the logos dialectic as it applies to philosophy and as it applies to midwifery, getting rid of our problems. So treat yourself like a friend at all times. That's excellence, a part of it anyway. That also includes if you're a teacher or a coach or a banker or a judge or a politician, or you have some influence over creating these institutions in our world. So replace that bullcrap piggy bank idea of education with this one, the one that's true. Why is it true? Because Socrates says so? No, Socrates says it's easy to disagree with Socrates. Forget Socrates, follow the logos. The logos says it's true. It's provably true in nous. It's understandably true in dianoia. The implications of what happens if you don't follow it, you can see by people who just play out beliefs instead. By people who chase physical things, gold and silver, honor and offices. In other words, not only can you see it's true by the things that determine truth, you can see it's true by playing out the implications of what if it isn't true. That's the dialectic. Side A is what if it is what follows. Side B is what if it isn't what follows. That's the dialectic. You can see both. We have a Meno and we have a Socrates. It's both. This text is giving us a dialectic of true understanding of education, of learning, of what it means to be a soul and what it means to treat yourself in a just way, in a virtuous way. So neat. We can understand why we have the problems we have, and we can understand what's needed to solve it. In other words, we don't have to be a slave to nuclear bombs and mousetraps bombing the earth to death and ending our species. We literally, with the Balboa translation and the philosophical midwifery textbook, we literally have what we need to understand our problems, get out of Meno's problem, develop the mastery of Socrates, and then use what we are discovering by going through that process, our own demonstration, reflect on that to discover, oh, hang on a second, we can use this process to get here, turn it upon itself, that's ousia, to go beyond even being, beyond even principles and truth. That's the question Socrates left us with. If these things that we have been talking about are real beings, eidos, and virtue, and they are all parts of virtue, and we want the whole of virtue, then we want the whole of being. But how can you know the whole of being or what virtue is if you don't know the self? So this might have gone over Meno's head, but because of this reading that we are doing, it's not going over ours. We can recognize, oh, Socrates is not teaching us or something, but giving us what we need to learn. True excellence by saying, hey, go beyond me. That's the level of self. That's the question we're at. In the text, he said, let's start again from the beginning. And we know what he's saying is, oh, let's start again from the beginning with this question in mind. Because that's reading. That's, hey, once we are realizing we're on the true hero's journey with our wizard's cap, and we are looking for puzzles and looking for questions and puzzles to solve, that's our Sherlock Holmes cap. Once you have discovered a question, you have to take it with you. Put it in your inventory. Put it in your question sack. Where's our question sack? Where's our mate? Here we go. This is us. What it means to be a philosopher. Seeking excellence. We added aporia last time. Uncertainty, puzzled, difficulty, at a loss, okay with embarrassment, okay with perplexity. But also we have to add our Sherlock Holmes hat, which looks like this. And he's got a pipe. That's an awful looking pipe. Let's do a little thing here, and then this, and then there. Let's zoom in a bit. Okay. There we go. There's our Sherlock Holmes man. And this is his pipe. Oh, goodness. Okay, I'm going to use some straight lines here. There we go. And then... there we go. We need our Sherlock Holmes cap on. And we take it, put the question in our question sack. So we're going back to the beginning with the question in our question sack. The question is, how can you know what virtue is if you don't know the self? Something that we have never been able to read up until now because of the Balboa. Let's see it in the other texts, just to make sure. It's important to recognize that one of the reasons why this isn't something that's so simple and obvious for us, because of our reading, ain't simple and obvious to anybody in the world right now. If it's so simple and obvious, why do we still have these problems? Oh, is the self the same as psyche? Oh, good question. So in the chat, is the self the same as psyche? So what we're looking at here is... good question. So all of this is the psyche. Our consciousness or mind, our psyche or our soul. Psyche is another word we use for psyche is soul. You can operate with beliefs. That's a cognitive function. and every cognitive function has its proper object. So you have beliefs about the things you experience in the physical world with your physical senses. The fancy word for what part of your mind you use is epistemology. That's only when you want to be fancy. Cognitive functions. There are different levels of belief. We have prejudices, which are beliefs that are not supported by evidence and reason. So racist people, sexist people, that kind of thing. You have simple beliefs, like I believe my car needs petrol. I don't know why, but it's enough. I don't need anything more than that. You have like scientific beliefs, beliefs that are proven by evidence and reason. You have axioms, like things that are always true because by definition. And below all of these, you have pathologos. That's a fundamental false belief that keeps you trapped in your development. This is the cause of human problems. These are the kinds of, because of prejudice, you can change your mind about. A lot of people have racist beliefs until they go to college or they leave their house or they leave their small town. And they realize, oh, gee, with new evidence, new reasoning, I have conversations, so I have new reason. I have different experience, so I have new evidence. I can change my prejudices. Pathologos doesn't function that way. Pathologos are the kinds of false beliefs about self and reality that you are fiercely loyal to, whether you like it or not, and this is what causes your problems. That's why you have to be doing philosophical midwifery, which is what we do on this channel. It's half the time we do that, half the time we do philosophy, which is how to understand the cause of our false beliefs to free ourselves from those things that block us. So our journey is along the logos. Logos is the understandable pattern of reality that we can follow to reach our goals. But along those, we have blocks that jump in. Now, if they're blocks, then they're not the logos, but they block the logos. Pathologos functions to block your logos. So if you've ever had a conversation with somebody and they're following reason really well, then all of a sudden they start acting mental, start saying, I don't like your tone, or you're patronizing me, or your eyes are too close together, or I'm going to fight you. These are all things that function to block your reasoning, block your logos. That's the pathologos, blocking the logos. So you have to get that block out of the way. By the way, you have to be doing philosophy, because philosophy is the understanding of the logos, the mastery of the logos, and the climbing of the logos. So you won't surface your blocks unless you're doing philosophy, and you won't remove your blocks unless you're doing midwifery. That's why the two go together as a complete spiritual tradition and a complete learning tradition, personal development tradition. So your psyche, along that ladder, you can have different... So let's look at it over here, because we've drawn this ladder up already. Where is that ladder? Ladder. Surely we've got a ladder. Have we not done a ladder? Yes, here we are. So this ladder that you climb with your psyche, with your consciousness or soul, you could say, is the logos ladder. You develop understanding. That's what we're learning to do as we read. As we read in this way, we're also changing our state of mind. So the ladder has a rail of understanding and a rail of state of mind. So, and we can also, and by the way, the structure of the whole ladder, that's the dialectic. The structure of the logos is the dialectic. That's what Socrates has been laying out to us in the Meno. So our psyche can be at a really low level of understanding. One of the lowest is called nihilism. You think nothing is real. And that has an accompanying state of mind, understanding and state of mind. If you think nothing is real, you're a nihilist, then you are very depressed and lonely and sad. But then you can climb to other ones. Maybe you think there is something that's real, but it's just physical. That's materialism. Maybe there are ideas that are also real, but they're just relative to definitions Like what you say is beauty to you, but my truth is different. It's all relative to opinions. That's a little bit higher. Different kind of understanding. Different kind of state of mind. So, the self is at the end. So the self is what is experiencing the psyche going through this development. Another way of saying that is the self is the cause, so it's the goal, so it's the final cause, what we're after, but it's also the first cause. If there is a ladder of development that unfolds in our understanding and states of mind, but also ontology. This is epistemology, how we think. Ontology is what actually exists. What's the dimensions of reality? People have astral travel experiences. People can leave the physical world, experience the world of being, and so on and so on. There are different dimensions we can exist at. And each level of understanding and cognitive function, like beliefs, have its function in the physical world. Dianoia is only about the world of being. So this is all our psyche. But then you have the question, what's experiencing even that? Or if this logos and dialectic unfolds in this way, where did this all come from? What was not only the final cause, our destiny, our final goal at the top of the ladder, but what was the first cause? What created this? Where did this logos unfold from? That's the question Socrates has given us right now in the text. Also, this ladder casts a shadow. That's our vice, that's our problem. So while there's a logos, there's a pathologos. While there's our destiny reaching the self, there is our fate, causes our failure. To spend our life becoming more and more entrenched in our false idea of ourselves, which causes our problems. It becomes our mask, our mannerisms, our way of treating ourselves. But it's always a negative. It's always a diminished view of yourself and a diminished view of reality. That's the pathologos that we have to uncover as we go. And the higher you climb the ladder, the more depth of your pathologos you'll surface. The more you do midwifery, the more you become free, because freedom only exists when you can free yourself from your pathologos. And the more freedom you have to climb this ladder of the logos to reach your ultimate destiny, knowing the self. And Socrates is saying, hang on a second. How do you know the whole of the psyche? How do you know the whole of mind? Because that's needed for virtue. So he's saying, hey, go to this level, the self. Sometimes this world of being is called the self experiencing the self. So it's often called the highest experience, because the self is beyond experience. It's that which is having the experience. But if the self was to experience the self, if the self was to experience the self directly, that's called ousia. And we have to use that word because we don't have a word for it in English. So being is often called ousia. It's mind knowing mind. The most immediate, the self can know itself through experience. That's why all of these words that we are looking at, that are the aspects or parts of being, kick ass. Beauty itself, bliss itself, pure light of being. They're literally the words that would describe the highest possible experience. Which is why many spiritual traditions who don't have the logos, they haven't learned to read the way we are, and they don't have a Balboa translation, and they don't have this philosophical midwifery book. When they do have this experience, they think, oh, that's enlightenment. That's the end of the game. Because they lack the logos. Or they have a pathologos blocking them to reflect on even the highest experience. Fortunately, we don't have to have that problem, but one of the questions is, how can we be at a greater level of whole so that we can help people even with that problem? Even a Taoist or a Buddhist who might have had this experience and they think, oh, now I'm enlightened. Or hey, can be anyone. There was a guy that my teacher knew who grew up in a kind of a Christian cult, He had a brilliant light of experience, of being experienced. He thought that was the end. So he thought he was the next coming of Jesus. In order to help such a person, you need to be at a higher cognitive level. That's the question that Socrates is giving to us. The question here, how can you know whatever virtue is without knowing the self? So good question. And that also helps us to shed more light on the significance and stakes of having that question. Why is that question so significant? Well, for all those reasons we just talked about. Now, what we can do is see that this is 79C, and our assertion is we have never been able to do philosophy up until now. That's why we have to awaken philosophy, because we haven't had an actual translation of these key words that will allow us to wear our Sherlock Holmes hat and actually solve these puzzles. And a virtue can't be taught, but you can only give questions and puzzles for people to play for themselves. You can only be an Aeolus and encourage people to be a Hercules. Then we've literally been unable to do philosophy. If these key words, and therefore the key puzzles, haven't been in the text. It's like playing a video game and you need a certain key to get through a door, but the programmer has never put in the key, so everyone's been stuck on the first level. Which is why we are completely irrational and immature about ourselves and about our psyche as a species. So if that's the case, we should jump into the past translations and make sure that we can see that these keywords are not there, specifically the self, and specifically real beings. Because we needed to recognize, we need to make that connection. Hang on a second. If all of the individual virtues were real beings, but they were all parts of virtue itself, Socrates is saying to have the whole of virtue is to have the whole of real being. But how can you know the whole of real being without knowing the self? That's the big question that we have discovered. Now we need the terms to have discovered that question. In the chatty chat, thanks for the thorough explanation. I'm also just starting to learn ancient Greek. Wow.
I don't want to eat a monkey.
You don't want to eat a monkey. You want to learn ancient Greek.
I don't want to eat a monkey.
So that's cause for celebration. Because so many Greek words don't have equivalent in... Oh, well said. Absolutely. And let's have a look at some of them now. So we're in 79C. So let's jump onto the internet. So we're in space. That's where the internet lives. So 79C. Just before 79C. Yeah. So this is the section. So we're looking for the words real beings. Let's go back to 79A. Let's have a look at it. These are the keywords we pulled out. 79A. The way of providing. So Meno has a definition of what makes virtue: desiring good things and being able to get them. So if the way of getting or not having things, aporia, either having it, getting it, or not getting it is still virtue. If the only way you can get gold and silver or whatever you think is good is through injustice, then it's not justice, it's not virtue. So he says, let's review. So you said the power of being able to get good things is what makes people better. The ability to get good. Why? because he started with the idea that what makes people more or less excellent, to desire beautiful things and be able to get them. Now, Socrates used his art through questions and treated him like a friend, and Meno was being a friend in return, playing, asking questions. He didn't shut the conversation down or punch him in the head or call him a fat head and run away. So they're being friends, which is important. Find people who you can be friends with so you can play, you can both walk the Logos quest, the quest that you're here for to reach your destiny. Using this dialectic, he said, hey, by the way, when you say beautiful things, do you mean good things? A simple step, yes. Therefore, virtue is, excellence is, desiring good things and being able to get them. And then he helped him see, hey, by the way, doesn't everyone want good things? He didn't think so. There were bad guys who we would say need to be bombed and genocided, and it's okay to exploit their labor for profit for our CEOs because they are bad people, and virtue is being bad to bad people, and we have lots of balloons and lots of confetti for some reason. So very common idea, but within one page he was able to see that actually everyone desires good things. It's just a matter of if they're at that cognitive function of belief below that line, because you can be led to believe bad things are good. So while you're still desiring good things, you have been conned or grifted, or through a pathologos or the manipulation of your pathologos and prejudices, to actually desire bad things. That's why the poor people and the religious people vote for the fascists, who are going to take all of their stuff and take away their rights and oppress them. Because, hey, don't you hate brown people and women? Yeah. Then vote for us. But are you going to harm us? Forget about that. It's not about being good. It's about harming your enemies. What was Meno's first definition of what virtue is? The one he was most confident about? It was do good to your friends, harm your enemies, and never get harmed yourself. Oops, in the text. Do good to friends, harm your enemies, and be careful never to suffer harm. And by the way, women are less than men, and slaves can exist. Very common idea of what virtue is, even today. So you can say, well, what's our politics? This. You have the progressive say, hey, let's do good to friends. Let's increase social programs for our fellow citizens, our friends. And you have the right or the conservatives say, no, forget about doing good to your friends, including you. Let's just harm our enemies. Let's deport all the immigrants. Let's take away women's rights. Let's take away schools. Let's not give children lunches. Let's harm all our enemies, anyone who's not you. Children, women. Just like he said, hey, women are different from men, children are different, old people are different, slaves are different. So really only a rich, what we would say now, a rich white man in America or whatever. Men are best. This is the exact same hierarchy that is preyed upon by conservatives or fascists or right-wingers or capitalists. Same thing. We can exploit children. We can take away healthcare for the elderly. We can pay women less. We can have child slave labor. Yeah. Why? Because us men get richer. Yay, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and blah, 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 blah. Same thing. So one appeals to being good to your friends. By the way, they still say, oh, we're going to make sure not everyone's our friend. And we're not going to really understand what it means to do good. and we are still going to grift you because we still live in capitalism, while the other team's marketing is all about harming your enemies. So we can understand left versus right in this bollocks politics game. Simply, it's just Meno's ignorant opinion about virtue. So how come we've had this text for 2,500 years and we haven't realized that this is exactly what we're doing? Now, later on, he changes it to, he learns more about what virtue is by listening to Socrates, hopefully reading in the way we have. And he has a new definition, which is a quote from a poet he likes, which is exactly how all of these people justify their opinions. I can quote the Bible. I can quote the law. Well, law's a bit different. I can quote the founding fathers. I can quote Hegel and Kant. To desire beautiful things, be able to get them. By the way, do you mean good things? Right. By the way, doesn't everyone desire good things? What do you mean? Oh, well, it's just a matter of if you're at level of belief or understanding. If you're operating at level of belief, you can be very easily tricked to think that bad things are good. That's right wing. That's capitalism. Ever wondered why every politician says, we're going to get more jobs? They're tricking you to think that jobs are good. Jobs are not good. If they were good, then all the rich people would buy them all. It's a con. Freedom from work to pursue philosophy and reach your destiny is what's good, and we can absolutely do that because we have the technology and the resources to efficiently, sustainably share all technology and resources in a way that can rationally, efficiently, and sustainably meet all human needs, giving very little, if any, human time needed to be dedicated to maintaining our physical body, and therefore give us the time to pursue the logos and understand the path of logos to fulfill our destiny. Very, very simple. Very simple once you say it. So our problem is, why aren't we doing that? Well, one thing is, we're not reading the Meno. Second thing is, we've only had this translation for a while, so it's been hard to read the Meno. And the third thing is, we've only had a formal model for how to remove our problems, our pathologos, for about 50 years or so. So it's new. But it's time. So being led to believe that bad things benefit is what will harm people, what makes people bad. Whereas recognizing, which we get through understanding, different cognitive level, as we've been saying, understanding, allows us to recognize that bad things harm. So no one is inherently bad, it's just what have your beliefs done to you? And so a rational society would be, let's address where we get our beliefs from so we can remedy all these negative beliefs that cause negative actions. And also, one of the problems is, hey, everyone's entitled to their beliefs. Beliefs don't affect people. Literally, at the time of recording, it's close to the presidential election in 2024, and all of the right-wing grifters are saying, oh, Trump's words don't mean anything. He's bloviating. He says he's going to be a fascist, and he's going to destroy half of the population because they didn't vote against. They don't like him. But just ignore his words. Why? Because I'm using different words. What are your words saying? My words are saying his words are the opposite to his words. But can't I say you're bloviating if this is a principle? Should I take the opposite of your words then? Gobbledygook nonsense. Words are, of course, important. That should go without saying. And our beliefs are important, specifically because the words which cause our beliefs cause us to pursue bad things which cause us to harm. So if you think harm is important, you must think the difference between belief and understanding is important. Therefore, you must think it matters what we believe, and therefore words are important, and how we treat people are important. So if everyone's the same, then what makes someone better than another? Well, it's not whether or not you desire good things, it's whether or not you can get them. Because no one wants to be harmed, because being harmed makes you miserable and makes you mean-spirited and makes you more of a slave to your pathologos, your kakodaimon, your bad daemon, the voice of your pathologos. The more miserable you are, the more you are playing out your pathologos. So no one wants to be miserable and pathologos riddled and mean-spirited. No one wants to be like that. Even the people who vote for Trump or whatever. They don't want to be that. They don't want to be miserable. They've been lied to. Of course they have been. There's a reason why he holds the upside down Bible, while at the same time using the military to attack protesters, including clergy. In that big famous photo op that Trump did with the Bible, he used the military to attack priests while holding a Bible. You can't be more obvious in your anti-logos, in your pathologos, in your not following principles, which are the logos. You can't be more obvious to say, I am lying to you, I am grifting you, but still the American Christians vote for the guy. Because if you grew up in a tradition that says ignore understanding, just have belief, you get to heaven, and if you don't, you're going to get to go to hell, you're going to be forced to go to hell, then you have already rejected understanding for belief, so you're more easily grifted on. So any education or any teacher that says, or any priest or whoever that says, hey, sacrifice understanding for belief, is doing injustice, which is exactly the same thing that happened at the Pathologos origin scene. You sacrifice your own understanding, knowledge, self-goals for belief. Makes sense if you go to a mechanic and you say, hey, why does the gasket go on this part of the engine? Oh, just believe me, bro. Run! That's not an actual mechanic. You're not actually an apprentice. You are being tricked to being dependent on this person who can manipulate you through his beliefs. So if that's the case, then the definition we have is virtue of excellence is to wish for good things and be able. Well, we all wish, then the wishing part belongs to all of us. So that doesn't make one person better than another. Well, how come there are good and bad people? More or less virtuous people? People who have problems, vice, people who have virtue? It can't be wishing for good things. It must be the and to be able. So it's our ability to get good. The power or the skill ability to procure, or for some reason that never saves, the skill or ability to get good. Now, this is good things, but the word is good. Because good is one of those words that can apply to all three levels. You can have good things in the physical world, a good sandwich and a bad sandwich. You can have goodness itself is one of the aspects of being. And the good self can apply to the self, the one self or the good self. And maybe there's a third, that's the Republic. So, Meno quite obviously thinks that the good things are, so Socrates points to good things that apply to the physical world and the world of being, health and wealth. And the word wealth doesn't just mean material wealth, but Meno said, no, I include gold and silver, physical wealth, not wealthness, not wealth itself. So the word wealth can apply to, let's actually nail this one down. We did it before, but it didn't save. So because there was a definition of wealth Pluton. There was a definition of wealth that also can apply to the realm of being. Oh, interesting. Comes from the word flow or abound and to return on a journey. Interesting. And no. Life, journey, return. Interesting. Riches or wealth. So wealth doesn't have to just be riches, treasure or gold, the whole earth. That's right. Pluton. It can be used metaphorically to refer to the whole earth. Okay. Neat. So we can see what Socrates is doing. He's using a word that trying to pull him into the level of reflection above here. Being. Health, he's already mentioned earlier in the text, is one of the aspects of being. It's a principle, because he said, hey, by the way, you say women and men and slaves and children are different and old people are different. But isn't strength the same for all of them? Isn't health the same? Does health also apply to children and slaves and women as it does to you? Oh yeah. So it's a principle that the eidos, the aspects of being, the principles apply to all of us. Meno says, nah, I'm in the physical world, pal. Oops, let's bring it up. I'm in the physical world. I mean gold and silver, philokrimatos, love of cremated tomatoes, and honors and offices, philotimos, the timocratic man, lover of honor. So the two things that people who are stuck in the physical world pursue when they're not actually pursuing learning in the logos, material wealth and fame. Dollar bills, y'all, and get them Instagram clicks. Get them ratios up. So do you mean good things, nothing else than these kinds? I mean nothing else. So Meno is really struggling. He's really tied to the physical world. By the way, so if what virtue is everyone wishes for good. So the difference between excellence and non-excellence is being able to get them. What if you can get them unjustly? Then that's not virtue. So justice, temperance, piousness, all these parts of virtue have to accompany. You have to get your wealth in a just way. You can't steal it from an old lady. You can't exploit your workers, Jeff Bezos. You can't grift people through racist rhetoric, Elon Musk. You can't use capitalism to extract wealth from the people who are doing jobs. Capitalists, bankers. That's injustice. That's not virtue. So, if that's the case, then not having gold or silver, this, again, a word that can apply multi-levels, not having gold and silver, aporia. That's the word here, aphoria. A-P-O-R-I-A, right here. Not having gold and silver, or whatever the equivalent is in being. Being is non-physical, so what's it about? Our state of mind or psyche, consciousness. So not being at the state of enlightenment or pure consciousness is still self-virtue if the only way of getting there is injustice. Therefore, the way of providing, no more aporia, being at a loss of this kind of goods, will be virtue. In other words, not knowingness, non-nous, is just as virtue as nous, provided you're doing justice, temperance, courage, piousness, health, and so on and so on. So this idea of being a knower is acting like you know everything, or being an alpha bro, all that kind of crap, where it's all about certainty, it's all about image, it's all about masks, it's all about pathologos, models of knowing, that's your way of being. That's not virtue. That's vice. That's injustice. And I don't mean vice as in like, little indulgences like having a cookie or having some chips or whatever. Vice as in injustice, disgustingness, terribleness, harming people, making people suffer, destroying humanity, fascism, that kind of crap. That's what vice means. You can have various levels. You can just be a bad business owner and exploit your workers, or you can be Jeff Bezos, or you can be Donald Trump. Different levels. That's what we mean by vice. The word is bad, but bad specifically to do with the excellence of our virtue of our soul. So, what's virtue? Wishing for the good and being able to get it. But hang on a second, everyone wishes for the good, all right? So what's virtue? Being able to get things you think are good, okay? But wait a minute, hang on, even not having it is actually virtue if the way of getting it is bad. Right, okay. So even not having good things, money, for example. By the way, Meno, are you playing with me? What? I said don't break it up. Use the paradigms for coming to an understanding, the dialectic, to tell me the whole of virtue, not a part. So far you said, hey, doing anything, so long as you're doing it justly, is virtue. Doesn't matter if you get it or not, because aporia, not having it, is just as good as having it. And it doesn't matter what you think is good, because everyone desires the good. So whatever you do, so long as you're doing it with justice, that's virtue. But justice is a part of virtue. So the whole of the thing is doing anything with the part of the thing. So what's a car? I don't know, doing anything with a steering wheel. That's not a good definition of a car. We need the whole. And how do we know the whole? By the way, he gave us a clue. The real beings. All of these parts are real beings. We want the whole of virtue, we want the whole of real beings. So this is the whole thing that we need to see. We need to see that the keyword aporia, being at a loss, aporia. We need to see the keyword real beings. We need to see the keyword paradigm. And we need to see the keyword self. Otherwise, you will never be able to read the Meno. So let's see how able we were to do that 10 years ago, or 100 years ago, or 1,000 years ago. Well, I mean, 1,000 years ago, you would probably be murdered for even having the book. But at least up until 10 years ago, let's say. So let's compare what we just read to what we have been working with up until now. Socrates, then it follows from your own admission that doing whatever one does with a part of virtue is itself virtue. For you say that justice is a part of virtue, and so is each of such qualities, like virtue. You ask the meaning of my remark. It is that after my requesting you to speak of virtue as a whole, you say not a word to what it is in itself. Is that different from what self-virtue is? Is itself a certain translation that doesn't necessarily mean self in the honorific and self in the absolute, in the ultimate. But tell me that every action is virtue provided that it is done with a part of virtue, as though you had told me what virtue is in the whole, and I must understand it forthwith, when you are really splitting it up into fragments. I think, therefore, that you must face the same question all over again, dear Meno. What is virtue? If we are told that every action accompanied by a part of virtue is virtue, for that is the meaning of the statement that every action accompanied by justice is virtue, or do you not agree that you have to meet the same question afresh? Do you suppose that anyone can know a part of virtue when he does not know virtue itself? Now that's the question that we got. Now what we read is, do you think that anyone can know what virtue is if they do not know self? Allowing us to build this model. When he does not know virtue itself? Different, hey? Now, they also needed to recognize earlier at 78E, the other clue that all of these things were real beings. Otherwise, we would not be able to discover the question. 78E. It seems that, let's jump in, it seems that justice or temperance or holiness or some other part of virtue must accompany the procuring of these things. Otherwise, it will not be virtue, though it provides one with goods. Beating up an old lady to steal her purse doesn't make you good. Republicans, politicians, capitalists, Elon Musk, so on and so on. Yes, for how without these could it be virtue? And not to procure a gold and silver when it would be unjust, what we call of the want of such things is virtue. Now, this is where it can be helpful. It's a different way of phrasing it that can help us shed more light on what we've been reading, but we absolutely necessarily have to have the Balboa translation first. So what was in the text, being at a loss, notice the difference. Being at a loss is all one word hyphenated. Also the difference, we have the actual Greek aporia. Aporia is one of those words that doesn't have a direct English translation, and we have to carry and wonder about, and maybe it'll be multidimensional like the word self or good. So our translator, Juan Balboa, puts it hyphenated to say, hey, look, first of all, capital letter. Second of all hyphenated. This is the closest you could get as English, but because his job is to also make it readable to English readers. But he's saying he puts it in a different color, he puts it in bold, he puts a capital letter, and he puts it all hyphenated to say, this is the word you need to see. This is the key that unlocks the door to the mansion. You'll never start the video game in the mansion unless you first get the key. Smash the pumpkin, get the key. It's an old reference to a Hugo's House of Horrors for anyone who's familiar with that archetype of adventure games. Smash pumpkin, get key. This is the key. So this, putting it like this is to say, hey, look underneath. Look, it's one word. So we get the Greek and we get a more accurate translation, and we get it given to us as this is the best you can do in English, guys. So Juan Balboa, we've said it before, it's worth saying multiple times, we owe so much to Juan Balboa because he has given us what we need to awaken philosophy for our souls, to learn what it means to read, to do the game. And also, it's what humanity needs to solve its problems, and correct itself. So, once again, I've lost my sound effects. There we go. Big round of applause. And equally so, if you were unfortunate enough to have grown up... Okay, let's not put it that way. If you have been interested in philosophy and you haven't been able to read the Balboa, please value it as highly as we do. Don't take it personally that you've been grifted, but, you know, and hey, maybe you've developed some background understanding that will very, very, very much help you. It hasn't all been a loss, but you can't really unlock the logos without the Balboa translation. So again, really grateful to Juan Balboa for his translation. So, what have we been dealing with up until now? The want of such things. Now, not bad. Doesn't have the Greek, doesn't point to the significance of this one word. It's not all hyphenated, not capital letters. But not bad. Not neat, not complete. So this is the time when we can actually be grateful for, well, we can use these past texts to actually shine more light so long as we're reading the Balboa first. So we call the want of such things, aporia, is virtue, is it not? When the getting of things would be unjust. Right. Oh, apparently, says Meno. Meno's not completely on board. He still wants good, he wants those honors, offices, gold and silver. He still wants those dollar bills, yo, even if he has to be gangster about it, yo. So again, Meno's mythology, Meno's false beliefs, very much in every aspect of our society, even in popular music and stuff, and culture. Right? Same thing. A lot of music is all about money, no matter what. A lot of movies that are said, oh, the best movie is The Godfather. What's that about? Crime families, people who do unjust things to procure gold and silver, honors and offices. Socrates joked, yeah, no wonder your family is friends with the king of Persia, a guy known for being really, really rich. No wonder you like that sort of stuff. So it's all the way throughout society. Balboa of Platonic Dialogues. I was about to get Thomas Taylor. Thanks. Oh, good for you. Yeah, good for you. Now, you do have what I consider B tier for free on this Perseus website. That's what I look up here. It's the Loeb translations. You can get it for free at Perseus, Perseus. You can also get their little green books. Handy to reference to know where we are coming from as a society. So if you're going to be talking to other philosophers, it can be handy to go, oh, okay, you're probably going to be more familiar with this bad way of reading Plato. Also, it can shed light on, because every translator will give a different English translation. So like here, the want of such things, you might find that better than being at a loss here. But of course, you don't have to buy it because it's free. What I consider B+ tier is this book here, which is the Rouse translation, The Great Dialogues of Plato. I do recommend getting this anyway. It's fun to, like, I don't know, take to the beach and read and be familiar with, especially if you are going to be reading the Balboa translation, you will be able to develop a mastery of the art of the logos. And as we're saying, that involves you to be able to function in two kinds of ways, like a doctor. but you can be a doctor for people down here at the level of beliefs. Just because, you start as a human being at the level of beliefs. So you are familiar with a lot of things, and by reading the Meno, but also if you are reading this, the Rouse translation, you might have some people who are touching on the realm of being because they are reading the Rouse. You might be able to help navigate them to say, oh, by the way, the Rouse says this, but get the Balboa. So, I don't know. Plus, it's like a good relic. See how relic to mine is? It's all falling apart. I remember Dr. Pierre Grimes would always carry one of these around with him. He gave me mine, but I swapped it with a guy in California. I shouldn't have. Anyway. Yeah, so if you want to buy one, this is probably really cheap. It has the Republic, the Apology, the Credo, the Phaedo, the Ion, the Meno, the Symposium. In this one's like, these are all heavy hitters. But the Rouse is B+ tier. Yeah, Balboa is number 1 though, and it's free online. He doesn't have translations of everything yet. He's still working. But yeah. And there should be a link below. If you click on the link below, you'll find a link directly to the underneath the Twitch stream or the YouTube stream. There should be a link below. Or on the video if you're watching it on YouTube. Yeah, but good for you. So, back in here, the way of providing things is no more than aporia, or being in want of such things, will be virtue if the procuring of them comes to be without virtue. But as is reasonable, things that come to be with justice will be virtue. But on the other hand, that which comes to be without any of these real beings is vice. That's the big clue. Why did he throw in that they were real beings? Well, we saw that. That was the necessary clue to solve the puzzle to get into the mansion. So let's see real beings in here. So the procuring of these sorts of goods will no more be virtue than the want of them, aporia, but it seems that whatever comes to be by justice will be virtue, and whatever comes to be without any such quality, vice. No reference to real beings. Why did the translator leave that out? Now we can wonder about that. The cultural conditions, the historical conditions, maybe the lack of somebody like Dr. Pierre Grimes who was able to master the Logos in his lifetime and teach a lot of things to help us realize what was there. But also pathologos. The pathologos that we were talking about earlier, that blocks the development up the ladder, specifically functions to block the development into those higher levels of being, which means it will block and also blocks the logos that will allow such a thing. So the logos that allows the transition from your false beliefs to dianoia and then even beyond to the self, that's the pathologos. So unless the translator himself has been doing philosophical midwifery, he is going to feel compelled against even his will to translate beings as things, translate self as itself. So self down in the physical world, itself. Beings as things. Good as good things. So, everyone's understanding of Socrates and philosophy so far has been down here. So no wonder we are immature and irrational as a species. And even philosophers recommended on the algorithm of YouTube are just people owning in a debate. My belief is better than your belief. What about these beliefs? Shouldn't we treat the racist beliefs just as much time as these beliefs? Shouldn't we compromise with the right? Blah, 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 blah. No compromise up here. It's just true or it isn't. That's it. But my feelings are hurt when I want to do bad things and harm people. I don't care if you're a sadistic. That's nothing to do with truth. But I feel like I want to have false beliefs that will end up harming my soul, my children, and anyone who I have influence over. I feel like I want it. I really, really want it. Grow up. That's immature. Maturity is realizing that wanting bad things is bad for you, will harm you. But I want to eat the poison. Don't eat the poison. Now, we're not saying you're bad because you want to eat the poison. We need to reflect on who convinced you poison was so tasty? Who convinced you to vote for fascists? Who convinced you to sacrifice your understanding for beliefs? Not just within culture or religion or whatever, but specifically your fundamental false beliefs called the pathologos. You had to reject your own self goals, your self-learning, your self-understanding, and your self-quest to the self in order to accept what made it believable. Otherwise, you can only make a certain amount of progress. You'll hit a block at some level. Now, Meno's block is very, very quick. Now you can tell his friends we just read were friends with his family friends with the king of Persia. So he's a very, very rich kid. Socrates says he's good looking. Even a blindfolded person could tell he's good looking by the way he makes demands. He's very privileged and rich. So all of these conditions that we would normally consider benefits to being born into a physical world, being rich, being good looking, having connections, actually within the realm of philosophy can actually harm you more, can be greater hurdles to overcome because they make you more firmly entrenched in your beliefs and less likely to reflect on whether or not you know everything or whether or not you deserve to be rich. You ever heard Elon Musk talk about why he deserves to be rich? It's all gobbledygook nonsense. Well, I deserve to be rich because I'm good at managing people. You're absolutely not. You're a grifter. But that he needs to believe his own bullcrap. So if you are not rich or not good looking, or you don't have a lot of friends and connections, maybe that was actually a very, very good thing for what actually will benefit your soul and able to reach the actual good, not to be tied to the ignorance or the images that keep you bound to ignorance. So, unless our translator has been going through that, which he hasn't, except for the Ryan Balboa has, all of the things that are about being will be mistranslated as physical world things. So we think philosophy is just a physical belief. It ain't. It's specifically the opposite. And all of the logos that help us reach being will be mistranslated because the pathologos functions to block the logos. And as I've been saying before, I have been studying philosophy for many, many years, and I have met many people who've been in this game for a very long time. Even people familiar with the pathologos and familiar with how important the logos is, are compelled to block the logos when they reach a certain point where they can't go any further. That's why we have principles. That's why there are principles you can learn about in philosophical midwifery, and principles Socrates is demonstrating in the dialogues we read to say what happens when you reach your block. Do you start name calling? Do you run away? Do you kick people out of the group? All that kind of crap that just blocks the logos? Or are there principles you follow to pause, reflect on what you're doing, see whether or not the logos was blocked, see when the logos was blocked, take notes of when that happened so you can use those notes as material to apply the dialectic to in philosophical midwifery, to discover, to follow that journey of the dialectic back to the root definition, the false definition you're carrying of yourself and reality that manifests in this way to block the logos. That's the false definition you need to get to, the pathologos, that when you get to, you can free yourself from and become free of that block. The further you go into the logos, the more of that block you'll see. You have to go all the way to free yourself completely. That's the game. Everyone. It's not a personal attack. It's not a lack of character. It's for everyone. Everyone has to be making those notes. Just as we reread and reread this text in this way, we're not rushing through it. We're not trying to get through 10 texts a day. We are really taking our time because we need to pull out these notes. You should be writing this down because it's a principle. We are pulling out the material. So within pathologos, you follow the logos. That's called dialectic. And then you hit a block. And you hit a block. Block to the logos. The principles are you have to pause. And reflect on and see if the logos was blocked. And when it was blocked, because when it comes up gives you specific clues, like in a video game. You walk into the room and then you step on a certain thing on the floor and then all of a sudden the lights go out. Specifically when it happens is a clue. When it happened, when I stepped on the floor thing, that must be a part of the puzzle. Same too with this. When was the logos blocked? Then you have to take notes. Take notes. That you then go back to. To solve the puzzle. So we can take what we're learning from the Meno to help our understanding. We can say taking notes. These are the clues. And this is also aporia. We don't know. We just have clues. We are puzzled. Why did I block the logos? I love the logos. I've been doing the logos for 40 years. Why do I want to stop this conversation right now? Be puzzled. If you're not, then what can I say? Have courage. Trust your friends. Courage is following the logos even if it doesn't feel true. Your friends will help you point out when you might be blocked. They're not friends unless they are encouraging you to reflect on the logos in this way. If they just say, you've got a block, believe me, they're not your friends. They are themselves blocking your logos if they say that. You've got a block is an invitation to reflection on the logos. It's not a way to block the logos itself. In other words, don't use your understanding of the logos and pathologos to do your pathologos. It's a huge problem. If you're not following principles, these problems can be solved if you are following the principles. So, go back to solve the puzzle, which is using the dialectic, and that's called philosophical midwifery. And then that can happen later, but you have to promise to do it. Otherwise, your mind won't let you step around the block. And that leads to freedom. These are the principles. Now, that's for philosophical midwifery, but it's also for reading. We are doing the best to follow the logos when we read. We are seeing when the logos is blocked. When does Meno have a block? When does the logos of the conversation not quite make sense? When does Socrates throw a spanner in the works? Like right now, let's go back to the beginning. Why? Have we reached a conclusion? Have we given birth to a puzzle? So when was the logos blocked? Was it at a time where we've been given a question? Take notes. What are the notes? We look for the key terms: real beings, whole, parts, virtue, part of virtue, whole of being, self. All of these, take notes. That's what we did today. And we've been doing the last couple of episodes. All of those notes, by the way, have not been present in any of the translations up until now. So in other words, our block to the logos has been here until the Balboa translation. So we take those notes. We are at a loss. We don't know, but I've got a degree. I look at all my diplomas on the wall. I've got a PhD in philosophy. Who cares? Be puzzled. But I'm rich. I've been told my whole life that I know everything. That's why I deserve to have servants, and they don't deserve to have me as their servant. Who cares? Drop it. Meno. Be in wonder. Be at aporia. Be at a loss. Then take those clues and wonder about it to solve the puzzle using the dialectic. That's called philosophical midwifery when it applies to our problems or our blocks. So again, it's the same thing. This learning to read or learning to use the dialectic applies to both positive and negative, to our blocks, to the logos, and to reading. So reading applies both ways. You have to do this. Otherwise, you're not following the logos, which is a lack of temperance. Oh, because temperance is arranging the aspects of your psyche to follow the logos. It's lack of courage. Courage is following the logos even when it feels like the block. Hey, by the way, it wouldn't be a block if it didn't feel like you were right. Of course it feels like that person is patronizing you. Of course it feels like they're talking down to you. Of course it feels like that you hate them for some reason. Of course it feels like their eyes are too close together. Of course it feels like they're just whatever. All these personal attacks or might feel, oh, they're not enlightened enough. Yeah, who cares? Follow the logos anyway. Even though all of those things feel like you're right, feels like it's true. What does the right wing, what do the fascists use to appeal to the injustice of people to get them to act against their own benefit? Truthiness. That was George Bush's key word. Hey, it might not be true, but it feels true. Doesn't racism feel true, guys? Vote for me. Yay, fireworks. That word was, used to be a meme back in the day, back in George Bush Jr.'s day. Stephen Colbert, who was parodying all of the fascist propagandists, right-wing news, they're not news. Legally, they're not news. It's opinion pretending to be news, legally. Because they were brought to court for lying, and they said, oh, but we're not news. We just tell people, we're just lying to people. There's no law that says we can't lie to people on television to get them to act against their own interests. So we can tell people we're news and we're not. Officially. Oh, maybe there should be a law that says you can't do that. Oh my God. Obviously there should be. So if you're making laws, make that one. Truthiness is, it's not true, but it feels true, and I'm going to do that anyway. Racism. Meno's way of thinking. Women are less than men. Children are less than men. elderly people are less, slaves are even less. None of that's true. We saw for ourselves having gone through the dialectic, but if we were a slave to what feels true, we'll get stuck in our injustice. And if that's the people who get elected to power, that's the end of the human species. That's the fate we are on right now. Courage is to follow the logos even though it doesn't feel true. By the way, eventually it will. After you've jumped these hurdles, next time you go around on the track, the hurdles won't be there. That's courage. And of course, mastering the dialectic is learning how to follow the logos. That's wisdom. Doing it at all times is justice. So in other words, if you're not doing these things as principles within your relationships, within yourself, to yourself, within any groups you have, within your reading, then you are vice. If you are not doing this, if you are trying to do this but not doing it well, that's still self-virtue. You are at a loss, but you're still doing it anyway. That's what we just read. The not having of this good, by the way, this is good. This is good at the level of being. It's not gold and silver, but as we read, even in this translation, the want of such good things is virtue. So the getting of the good things, and of course that's a much more greater good than money, because that's a learning you can take with you in any situation, including in your next reincarnation or in any level of reality you find yourself in. So the procuring of goods is no more self-virtue, again, don't have the word self there, big problem, than the want of them. And by the way, we saw earlier in this text, one of the first dialectics Socrates gave us on what virtue is, it's managing the self well, well, the first definition was dialectic. It's an eidos, it exists. You use it in the dialectic, and it applies to anyone, whether you're a man or a woman or whatever. Don't be racist, don't be sexist. Use of the dialectic with your eye focused on being. By the way, if you use the dialectic with your eyes focused on being, you are managing yourself well, and if you do that, if you try and do that, you're always acting justly. So again, we have a paradigm for how to be just. You don't have to have done it. In other words, not being able to do it well, not actually reaching the good of being free of your blocks, or of being able to follow logos all the way to a direct experience of being in nous. You don't have to get to the end. It's just doing it. So what's the good that's we need for our soul in everything we do? The dialectic. That's what we got from the Meno. But also, what's part of the dialectic and the logos? Principles. The use of your dialectic while also following the principles of when to notice the logos is blocked. So this is the good. Doing it at all times is justice. Formally, that's what Socrates told us already in the text, but also we worked it out for ourselves because we realized that the four virtues, temperance is keeping your cool while following the logos. Courage is following the logos even when it doesn't feel like it's right. Wisdom is mastering the dialectic to follow the logos, and justice is doing it at all times. Socrates says justice is doing this at all times. Managing yourself in this way at all times is justice. So you have a handy metric to know whether or not you're being just. Whether you're applying the dialectic, and whenever you find a block to the dialectic, you pause, see when it was blocked, if it was blocked, and when it was blocked. So let's put if down here. if it was blocked and when it was blocked, take notes, which are the clues. So those are the key terms, taking the notes. We've already got that up here. Looking for key terms. We should separate this apart a little bit. So all of these things, actually it's interesting. Our idea of our little model to help us understand what we're doing and so being a philosopher, they're all coming out in this model. Looking for key terms, being at aporia, being okay with being embarrassed or not knowing or being puzzled or uncertain, pushing the implications, using the dialectic. Oh, that should be up there. So we can add to this. Always, let's give it a better color. That's all right. Always, zoom in a bit more. Always using dialectic, and also to manage self, which is a question, because what does it mean that you're always using the dialectic to manage self, even when you're talking with others? Does that mean others are not the same as, not different than self? It's a question for us. Follow the logos. When you have a block to the logos, pause, see if the logos was blocked, when it was blocked. Don't succumb to your pathologos-driven feelings, like the grifted, like the right-wingers say. Hey, don't you have feelings that racism is true? Doesn't have truthiness. It's not actually true, but it feels true, so it's true, right? Wrong. That's the whole Stephen Colbert's Colbert Report character. That's the essence. I'm going to say all these racist, prejudiced lies that feel true and act as though that's as true as anything else. And what was wild is all of these right-wing politicians went on his show because they didn't see anything wrong with that. That's the way they thought. They are ignorant. They don't have courage. They don't have virtue. A lot of them born into wealth and privilege. Almost all of them were born into wealth and privilege, making it harder to do this. Follow the logos. Notice a block. Take notes when it is blocked. Be okay with not knowing. The worst thing you can do in politics, apparently, according to these ignorant people. Then go back and use the dialectic to solve the nature of the block, and that gives you a freedom from it. So everyone should be learning the dialectic. Should be like, by the way, what's the qualification to be a mechanic? Well, there's certain things you have to do. What's the qualification for being a doctor or a pilot? Certain things. What's the qualifications for being a politician? Nothing. Nothing. The most important job in our society, like, again, we are our most important job because philosophy is the most important thing, but socially is politics. What's the criteria? Nothing. What should be the criteria? Dialectic, midwifery. Always. You want the most virtuous people to be in charge. What's the most virtuous people? The people who can do this. Recognize that there might be a block to their logos, be a friend to themselves, trust their friends, go through this process to become free of it. How well is Meno doing that? How well did our past translators do that? Not very well at all. But we are doing this, and we can see that this is also the same thing as reading. So we can have a question. Is this reading? Different color. Is this reading? Because that's what we've been using to read. And as such, we have a question. And we've seen that the keywords hasn't been on the table. So anybody doing this, congratulations, you are trailblazers, you are renegades, you are, I don't know, pick whatever hero you want to be from your favorite show. You are the, I don't know. Who's that guy with the Wookiee? You're the guy with the Wookiee, the renegade Millennium Falcon driver. Why can't I remember his name? Han Solo. You're a Han Solo of philosophy. You're a Harry Potter trailblazing a new path or something. Or I don't know. You're a Deku. Learning what it means to be a real hero. Or you're a, I don't know. Naruto, showing people what it means to actually be a true Hokage. All of that is what you're doing, and we've seen for ourselves why. Because these key terms that we need to be getting as clues haven't been available. These have been off the table until now, which means you have to start. We have to start again from the beginning, learning to read. And learning to read not only the logos, but also read the messages we are getting sent when we're blocked from the logos to free ourselves from our pathologos. We're starting again from the beginning, having learnt to read. So, where are we in the text? Therefore, it appears to me you must start again from the beginning, wondering how can you know whatever virtue is without knowing the self. So we are, as fellow adventurers
I'm
here,
looking for someone to share in an adventure.
True heroes.
You're a wizard, Harry.
We are going back to the beginning of learning how to read, or learning the nature of philosophy itself. We are going back to the beginning while learning how to read. And we can, just as in the text, we are going back to the beginning with a with a paradigm of how to read. That's a dialectic. That's the new paradigm of reading, the dialectic, the paradigm, and with a question. How do we know the whole of being and the self? So, let's add that. Is this reading? Following the logos, the dialectic. There's our paradigm. There's our model. Looking for a block to the logos, pausing when we're ever blocked, seeing when it's blocked, taking notes, solving the puzzle, using the dialectic. Philosophical midwifery is also, so it doesn't have to philosophical midwifery or philosophy, both. Also, all while wondering about knowing the whole of being, which is also virtue and excellence. from knowing the self. Because as we have to go to the beginning while wondering how can we know the whole of being, which is what we define virtue or excellence to be, without knowing the self. In other words, you can't. So how do we know the whole of being? What is the whole of being from knowing the self while doing this? This is reading. So as we read, we're always wondering about the self. What does it mean to know the self? And how can you know the whole of being from the self? That's a question, a mantra, a question, or a question, or quest. This is the question or quest we take with us as we do those things. Is that reading? Socrates is saying, start again and find out. Just as we are doing for philosophy, just as we are doing for the rationality of humanity, can we go back to where we left off as individuals, back to where we left off as children when we got our pathologos, false beliefs, and can we pick up where we left off in our human development to stop the genocide, exploitation, fascism, discord, war, debate, heal where we are, become virtuous and excellent as a species to not only save our species and planet from our planet will be fine maybe, save our species from extinction and find our true destiny. This is what we're doing as souls, and this is our task for humanity. Is that reading? Let's find out next time. On that cliffhanger, I hope to see you next time. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have a lot to be aporia and wondering about. I hope you are holding on to this question. You could call it a mantra. How do we know the whole of being from knowing the self? Because that seems to be excellence and virtue. While we do this, apply the dialectic at all times. Because if you do so, you'll be managing the self well. Take that with you. Take it with you in your day, in your week, in your month. Let us know how you go. Share your insights and your experiences with your friends. We are friends here. In that we are trying to do this as best we can. Even when it feels like our blocks are right. It's courage. Join the Discord to find other people who might be adventurers on this quest with you. As we say, philosophy isn't a solo quest. Join on Twitch if you want to follow in real time and ask questions, or on YouTube. You can do that there as well. Join the Discord for free. You find a link to the text for free below. And I hope to see you next time. Thank you so much for joining me.